Yes, please. So, will you have side, doctor?
During this day and age, the science and technology has advanced a great deal, and with the help of satellites and other devices, it is possible to forecast the sighting of new moon with reasonable accuracy, I suppose. Is it not reasonable that we should take advantage of these advances and fix our events according to the forecast? That will make life easier for many people.
You know, the horizon changes from place to place and from country to country. If you go to the satellite inside the moon, it may give you a wrong date as well. I mean, this is something, this is a geographical problem. It should be understood in the light of the geographical phenomena. If you go too far high, you can observe the moon which may have not risen that day at all, but was the moon of tomorrow. That will change the whole date. In fact, while I was here in 1955-56, I, together with Mirza Tahir and also I think Hazrat Sahib was also directly involved in that. We investigated the matter and we found out that in fact the horizon is just a technical term and also it is a general term. There are two different meanings to a horizon. When technically they say the moon is above horizon, that only means that if you make a tangent, direct tangent touching the surface of the earth to moon, then mathematically perhaps it's possible to observe moon. But practically it's impossible because the horizon is very thick in dust and other suspending particles, with the result that unless the moon rises above that dense area through which the rays are completely absorbed, it cannot be sighted at all in hand. So the minimum period for that is 15 minutes. Unless the moon is above 15 minutes, it can't be sighted. And that 15-minute period is also a changeable factor. Sometimes there is dust, sometimes it's a clear day, sometimes it's just after rain, and then the topography of the area between you and the moon also is a decisive factor. In some places it's a flat, straight run to the moon. In other places it's a mountainous area, and so there's so many factors involved that they told us at that time that it was scientifically impossible to exactly tell you whether the moon would be sighted by human eyes or not. If the weather is clear, that permitted. Even then it's not possible for us to say. So the phenomena of sighting is not at all something which has a relationship to the modern scientific developments. In fact, it's a psychological factor added to the religious ceremony. And that factor is employed by Allah. Because when you have a direct sentimental attachment to the sighting of moon, that is a phenomena which creates emotions in you. And those emotions are ultimately harnessed by your religious rites and worship, etc. So there are two different things altogether. Sighting by a few ulama from aeroplane and announcement by radio, it has completely nothing to do with the experience that you might have gained sometime in your life. You are standing, all of you together in a crowd, trying to sight the moon, and suddenly somebody cries, "I have sighted it." And he has sighted it, and he has also excited you. And everybody goes into an emotion, a wonderful experience. So that pleasure will be totally lost if you go mechanical about it. And why should the whole people have one day necessarily? It's not meant. It's not necessary. According to your own conditions, you can begin your Ramadan a day earlier or a day later. That is not at all significant in the eyes of Allah. What is significant, according to the system of moon sighting, is this, that you should have a personal relationship with the whole phenomenon and be absorbed in it. And that purpose cannot be served through scientific instruments.
So in those countries where the weather is most overcast, like here, where you can't even, it's overcast for months.
So it doesn't make any difference. Rasul Akram sallallahu alayhi wa sallam has already answered this question. He told a questioner that count the 30 days of a month and it can't go beyond. So what harm is done? A day short or a day extra, but within the limits of 30 days. Yes, please, that young boy.
What do we use the lunar calendar? What do we use the
lunar calendar?
Yeah.
Or solar calendar?
The lunar calendar.
The lunar calendar and solar calendar are two different things, different ways of judging time and passage of days and months, years. The lunar year is longer by 10 days to, so solar year is longer by 10 days to lunar year. Instead of 360 days, 365 days, it is 355 days. So the difference is not only that. The most important thing from a religious point of view is this, that lunar years go on changing with the result that sometimes a month, for example Ramadan, falls during the heat of the summer and sometimes in the extremely cold days where the weather changes. So it goes on rotating, and in various conditions it appears and rotates throughout the world. If Allah had chosen a solar year instead of lunar year, or a solar system instead of a lunar system, then it may have happened that if Ramadan was in, for example, June, in England, it will always be the longest Ramadan fasting days. And in Pakistan, they will be the hottest fasting days. And in Australia, there will be short, very short days and cold days as well. So it will be very unfair for different populations to enjoy or suffer different Ramadan altogether. So by this rotation, the whole world is equally treated, both to the north, nearer to North Pole and nearer to the South Pole. If you have a long day, at least you have the advantage of now not having suffered that thirst, which provides much more agony in Pakistan's comparatively short day. But still, you also have an advantage of having a Ramadan in the winter time with very little to suffer. And there in Pakistan, they have also Ramadan in winter days, very easy, very comfortable. So this advantage and disadvantage continues revolving. And in every 34 years, this circle is completed. So it's not for nothing that Allah chose the lunar days. It had to be that, otherwise it would be a very clumsy system.
There was a debate at my college which led us to discuss about the existence of God. And the students, they said the scientists, and I don't know which scientists they were talking about, but they said the scientists believe that there is no God and that all the things have been created by nature.
And what is nature?
Well, basically, we try to explain, but explain that that nature is created by God.
That is where the nigger is hidden, in fact.
Yeah.
What is nature? Unless you determine what nature is, the debate cannot proceed any further.
But they proved their thing by experiments. They said the two planets collided with each other, and so the two animals.
You're too vague for me to answer that question. The point is that you have to be very analytical when you come across an atheist, and first get the nature of it. Most of the atheists who are intelligent people, they don't behave like the atheists which you confronted. They know their weaknesses, so they call themselves agnostics. They only say this, that maybe there is a God and maybe there is not, but we don't know. So as long as we have not proof enough or scientific proof enough, we are not compelled to believe in that. So this is how they begin. But the atheists are those who say there is positive evidence of his not being in existence. I mean, there is no existence to God. It is positively proved. And they have the weaker field, in fact, to operate. So it depends on what sort of an atheist you are facing. The most common argument put forward in favor of the existence of God by the old religious scholars, which still continues to the day, is this, that after all there is a universe. Who created this? This is a very simple argument put forward. And when you say that, you are immediately caught in a vicious circle. The atheist would retort immediately, all right, if God created the universe, who created God? And if there must be a creator, then there has to be a creator of that God, and you have yourself proved that this is just a mythical question. You can never get out of it. So this is a very logical approach by the atheists when they say that. But the reason why they have got the advantage is because you have wrongly put the case entirely, altogether. You can sit down, please, and I explain. The fact is that those who say because there is universe, so somebody must have created it, they are wrong. This is not the way to put it. The most important thing is first to discuss eternity. Is there eternity? Do all things which are present are eternal or not? If they are eternal, what are the factors of changes and how the direction is given to them? If, for example, let's go back in history, they say the world has a history of 5.6 billion years, or 6.7, some 6.5, I don't exactly remember, maybe 6.5 billion years ago, that the Big Bang took place. So ever since, there has been change. Not an iota has passed where you don't observe change. Things are developing all to a perfection or near perfection. They are traveling. Nothing is stationary. And complexity is born out of simplicity. So if complexity is not guarded, it can turn into simplicity. It disintegrates. But for simplicity to turn into complexity is a very important scientific observation, because it's an uphill task. And the uphill task requires energy from outside. The input is always greater than the output. And it's never so that output is greater than the input. So it's impossible. If there is input of some sort, and organization is input, if from simplicity the creation is traveling towards complexity, and you observe organization, then there has to be some organizer. Now, when they say, all right, if there has to be an organizer, who organized God, you say you don't know. Because unless you know the facts, you can't raise a question. Now, one thing you can be certain, that this universe is not eternal. And because it is not eternal, there has to be something preceding it. And that may be eternal. And there is no argument against eternity. This is why I started with the question of eternity. Ultimately, it will end up there. If you have absorbed the whole thing, this is how it develops again. That simplicity, complete simplicity, such simplicity as the whole laws of science are non-operative at that stage, when before the Big Bang. There is no law of nature, this is called event horizon. There is nothing at all. No physical law, no chemical law, no other law in operation. So it is nothingness. In other words, this is what we call nothingness. We say Allah created from nothingness. In the scientific terminology, nothingness means a thing without property. Now when you say something without property, that thing disappears. It's only a word of necessity we have to use for something. Otherwise, without property means nothing. Everything which is in existence has to have a property. Some measurement, some mass, some radiation or anything. I mean, observable phenomena is called property, or which exudes itself. So the scientists believe, and they have positive evidence now, that at the time of Big Bang there were no properties. So the properties began to take shape ever since, and developed from simplicity to complexity. And that complexity had a direction. It was not a haphazard affair. It was a direction which it took. And that direction developed into complex scientific laws. And those complex scientific laws agreed with each other. And so much so that when a law was created, and if that law as such operated, there might have been no chance left for life to operate, then an exception was made to that law. In such detail, things were worked out. For example, when things become hot, they expand. And when they become cold, they contract. This is a general law. But in water, if it had acted exactly like that, there would have been no life. So an exception was made there. When the ice is made, it expands. Why? Because it was necessary for life. So there was nothing of blindness about it, no element of blindness about it. There is purpose, there is direction, there is government, and complete organization and full control over things. Now, why life would not have existed if this law was operated, that when you heat it, things expand, when you heat them, things expand, when you apply cold, they contract. Because the scientists say that when life took root in the oceans, if ice also contracted, what would have happened? That the surface ice would have settled down until the whole sea would have turned into ice. And there was absolutely no question during that climate of any warmth within the sea. Hence, the possibility of life is obviated. So what happened was, there was an exception made. Ice must expand when it becomes cold. Cold in water, when water is cold enough, it must expand. So when it expands, it comes to the surface. And also, when it's a law that water turns into ice is a bad conductor of heat, which means once the whole surface of the sea is covered, with thick ice, even if the temperatures outside are minus 100 degrees, the temperature below that would remain enough and comfortable for life. That is exactly what happened. So there are thousands and thousands of examples, I can quote on and on, where this phenomena of organization can be explained in a manner, as it is impossible for anybody, any scientist, to come out with the always repeated answer of chance. After all, there is some limitation to chance. Chance does not mean that for unlimited numbers of chances, it is possible to come and organize one after the other in a procession, an unending procession for that matter. So this is what I mean by organization. When there is organization and simplicity is traveling towards complexity, then there has to be an organizer. And if that organizer is eternal, there is no objection, scientific objection to that. Because anything can be eternal. If he is not eternal, then this universe has to be eternal. So from eternity, there is no escape. So if the organizer is eternal, then the vicious circle is immediately broken. We know universe, this is organized, but we don't know the creator, whether he was organized or was like that from eternity. So there is no objection, no scientific objection. This is how you can prove the existence of God to the atheist, at least to the extent that they can't mock at you and can't laugh at you that you're stupid and you're behaving in a manner that is not cannot survive in the modern age. No, this is wrong. The scientists are now turning into theists at a rapid rate, with the result that previously, 50 years ago, when the census was taken in America, the entire crop of scientists had not only become atheists, that because they were learning, it was the beginning of their learning and they had become proud of it. It was considered a shame to mention religion. They thought religion is just photos and science is science. That's the reality. Now the recent consensus has shown that 50% of the scientists in the world today have become theists. They believe in God. And because the science is reaching a state where it is becoming more and more difficult for man to consider that the chances took place. There is a scientist, a mathematician of high order and cosmologist by the name of Lyell. He has written a book together with somebody Singha, and they have mathematically considered the possibility of life coming into being on its own. Now, despite the fact that Mr. Lyell has gone too far away from common sense in giving his own theories of life, he has been very strongly censored because of that. But the basic argument, the scientific calculation of facts still remains intact. Nobody can attack that argument. So I'm not supporting what Lyell presents as theory of how life might have been created on Earth. Not at all. I'm just quoting that bit of argument with which he begins and which is the most important and fundamental point of this book. He says that for the first brick of life to be made, which is DNA and RNA, is the transformer part, he says so many enzymes are involved and so many proteins are involved that for the creation of those, you have to work it out scientifically. You have to have minus 400 chances to get together and organize. Now this is a term which, I mean 10 raised to the power of minus 400. It is impossible. No sane man on earth can believe that this can happen. Now this is a scientific mathematical language which may not be understood by others, but there are other mathematicians who have put it differently. One of them has suggested that if it is possible for the life chemistry to appear through chance, and for that chance to get organized to make the first break of life, so many factors are involved that only a few years ago in America there was a great conference of world scientists on biology. I am quoting one of them who belongs to the top of this branch of knowledge. He says, it's a very interesting example. He says, if you believe in that, you will also have to believe in this type of chance. That put alphabets on dices and throw the dices and expect those dices to get organized in a manner that words are made out of those letters, and those words get organized in sentences, words and consonants, vowels and consonants organizing themselves into words and then into verbs meaningful, and then not only just any expression, but a meaningful scientific expression. And then another sentence is made, and every time you throw dice, sentence after sentence is created until you reach a book the size of 5,000 pages, full of scientific data, with full stops and everything. He says if this is possible, according to mathematical calculation, then it is possible for chance to create the first break of life, not to mention the other stages involved in the whole process of evolution. So these people, they don't know their own subject. When they begin to brag against the existence of God, they simply are talking through their heads. Because now the scientists have reached a stage of knowledge that it's become impossible for the scientists to mock at the concept of existence of God. But I mean, it's a very long subject. I have just given you a taste of it. Yes, please.
Assalamualaikum.
Yes, please.
Assalamualaikum. I've been thinking over and over again whether to put this question forward to you or not. It's on the subject of the power of the mind.
It's
the subject.
Could you come closer to the microphone and speak a bit loudly?
It's the subject of the power of the mind. The human mind has such powers that one does not know. For instance, one can transfer thoughts by mind and pick up thoughts. Because I have read quite a few books on this, and I've talked to some people, and they've demonstrated to me that I was quite amazed. So I would be obliged if you could put your point of view on this subject, please.
Do you mean that if somebody is thinking, his thoughts can be conveyed to others?
That's right, yeah.
Is that what you mean?
Definitely.
On that I have already spoken a few days ago on this topic. The fact is that it is not only possible, it is a demonstrable fact. And the scientists nowadays, who are called parapsychologists, and the psychologists disown them and say they are not scientists, they are quacks and call themselves scientists. But they have been accepted now in the world, and in collaboration with some great physicists, among them some Nobel laureates, they have proved certain facts which were considered to be just myths before that. And among them is the fact that the mind is powerful enough to convey its thoughts to others. And some minds are powerful enough to receive and catch thoughts of others. And this happens in a manner as the man of today cannot explain how. Because science has not advanced to this stage has to find out forces other than the physical forces of radiation, etc., known to them. But they know this happens. And even at large distances. I will tell you a very interesting experience, my personal experience, which happened in London long ago. In those days, because we didn't indulge in the common pursuits of most of students from our country, we used to organize intellectual parties, interesting parties. Sometimes there were all-night parties, groups who were interested in intellectual talks and things. People would, the host would provide them with food for the whole night, and they would sit and talk and discuss and sometimes have games and so on. So once I attended an all-night party in Hampstead, and there various discussions were taking place. This also came up, whether somebody can, through the power of his mind, can convey things to others or can receive mental impressions without the means of radiation or these things. So I said, I believe in that, and it's possible, because although I am not an experience, but in principle it has to be. Because there would not have been any phenomena of ilham, revelation, if it were not possible. Because if revelation was made through ordinary means of physical radiations and things, then any ordinary instrument could also catch a revelation being made to a prophet or a holy man. And that is a system to which these ordinary people have no access. So there has to be some system which should be extraordinary. So this is why I believe in it. And they said, all right, are you ready for experiments? I said, yes, let's try, but I do not claim I have not had any experience. But all right, let's try it. So they said, you go out to a safe distance where you cannot hear us. And we will think of something, all of us, and make a circle. When somebody goes out and calls you, you come and sit in the middle of the circle and imagine or concentrate on what we want to convey to you. So I went out, and after a while somebody came to call me back, and I went and sat in the center. So I emptied my mind of all thought. I didn't make any effort, it was just emptied and sat there. And suddenly I thought I should undo the laces of my shoes. So I started undoing the laces of my shoes. I undid both the laces of my shoes and sat there, and suddenly somebody cried, yes, go ahead. I said, what do you mean by go ahead? And the whole process was stopped. They said, we had thought you were wearing your shoes fully laced. And we had thought that we will convey to you, undo your laces and take the shoes off. So you did half of it, and not the next half. So somebody became impatient and said, all right, go ahead and do it. So that is my personal experience. I know this happens. And my late father, Hazrat Mirza Tahir Ahmad, had that knack, and I also written that in his life history. Many times, so often happened that we were scared of sitting close to him, because he would read our thoughts. What we call clairvoyance. If somebody thought of a mistake, he would say, all right, don't do it. Things like that. And I was terrified many times, sitting in his company.
But can I start again? But do you think it's against Islam to pick up thoughts of other people, what they're thinking of, and go
pick up thoughts?
From other people.
You don't pick up.
No, but
they come to you.
No, but I've tried. I've practiced myself. That's why I could put this question forward to you.
No, there is nothing wrong with it.
No,
it's science.
If you really concentrate on one person and they're not knowing it, surely you can pick it up. And once or twice.
You can pick it up, but you may be wrong.
No, but once or twice, maybe 100 times, right? You have to try yourself. And if all the 100 times you are right, Okay? And then you have trust in yourself.
Then you are peeping into the private affairs of others.
Is that against?
If you do it intentionally, to peep into the private life of others, that is wrong.
Yes, but where it helps you.
So the manner is not, the process is right. There is nothing wrong with the process. But the question will be decided how you employ it and why you employ it. For example, television is good. In itself, it's neither good nor bad, in fact. You can see a very good program, a healthy program, a mind-building, a health-building program, and you can also see a rotten program which will destroy you morally. So how can one say television is bad? It is how it is employed. So if you have a gift from Allah and you employ it to the detriment of mankind, it is bad. If you employ it for the goodness, for example, if you sit in a company which are bad people and you think of good things of life, of Allah, of things which would improve the lot of that society, naturally this is a very good employment for your gift which Allah has given you. So try to do that.
Thank you.
Please, Rashid Sahib, now it's your turn after all.
The question is, Allah says in Surah Zariyat, the quote I got here is, وَمَا خَلَقْتَ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. Could you kindly illustrate the meanings of this? And second question to this is, which is more important to me, sir, is...
Shall I start with the more important one?
Yeah, how would you classify the Maulvis and the politicians as jinns, or, would you classify them as jinns or Ibnul Waqt? Ibnul Waqt.
Must be either of the two. Either they are Ibnul Waqt or jinn. Nothing else. You have narrowed the field of my answer.
Sorry, sir.
Now the question is that, first of all, in Surah Zariyat, Allah says, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. And secondly, he says, which is, and according to him, that is much more important than this. Now, note this point. That he says it's much more important for me to know whether the mullahs can be called jinns or not. Or, better put it, jinns or Ibnul Waqt. That's the question. How do you translate Ibnul Waqt?
The one who takes advantage of the time.
What is the one idiom used in English? Weathercock?
The one who is living on borrowed time.
Opportunist. Quite right. And weathercocks are also they turn their face without any principle as the wind blows. They are also opportunists. The first question is much more important because Allah says, I didn't create the entire universe, neither the jinn nor the nas, but for this purpose. The object of creation for you is the small question. Then the question of whether we call somebody with this by this name or not.
So please explain the way you like.
وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. Here the word Ya'budun is the most important thing to first determine what is the meaning of Ya'budun. Ya'budun can be translated as just the worship as you stand in prayer, or some other religions have their own rites in different manners. Some people call this ibadat. So if you limit the meaning of word ibadat to this extent, then a very great objection is raised against this verse and against the objectives set by Allah. for creation. Particularly those who are in their hearts not believers, whether they belong to any religion, any material. In their hearts they are not believers, they are non-believers. They mock at these things. They say, look here, what is God? After all, He is the most selfish being. He created the entire universe and has gone through the trouble of all this creation and laws, innumerable laws and struggles for existence and life and pain and death and suffering and happiness as well. Just for His own sake, that people would one day begin to worship Me and bow their head to Me. That is not a noble end. This is the question raised, and it has some weight, of course. But the word Yabudun cannot be translated as such. It's a word which has a very wide meaning. And unless you understand the meaning of this word, you cannot comprehend the purpose of creation. Because the purpose of creation is mentioned here. Yabudun means, it is the word from Abd. Abd means a slave. A slave is a person who follows the commands of his masters, has nothing of his own. And a slave is a person, in Arabic it is explained further, who follows his master's in his footsteps. Ta'abbada means a path which has been so heavily traveled that you find deep marks of footsteps. So somebody who follows some other being with a religious devotion and meticulously never goes astray, he is the Abd who has followed somebody. So when God says Yabudun, it means I have created you to follow Me and try to catch up with Me. And when you understand this word, try to catch up with Me, you know that He is a receding phenomena from you. He is not a limited being who can be placed here or there. It's an unlimited travel into excellence, from the lowest position to the highest. And that highest is not determined in terms of limitations. It is an unlimited travel into gaining more and more and ever greater excellence. So this is what the word Yabudun means. I created you from nothing. And as you can observe in nature, you were never left at the spot where you were created. At the moment of creation, you immediately started traveling towards perfection. You know, your elder brother has written a book, a small pamphlet in fact, in collaboration with another scientist. Something, I don't remember the title, but the first millionth of a second after Big Bang or something like that. Or the first 3 millionth of a second. And in that, how much might have happened and how rapidly the growth took place, it's fantastic in that short a time. But ever since the creation, there is a constant change in creation towards higher organization and better things. So Allah says that I am the creator of the same universe who is now addressing you. You have reached a stage where the unconscious development is now turned into a conscious development. Previously, you developed because of me, willy-nilly, whether you wanted or not. And you are compelled to go on traveling towards me, to a higher being. And from now on, it's up to you. But the purpose of your creation is this, that now instead of being an inanimate object traveling towards perfection, you are turned into an animate object with full consciousness to continue traveling towards me. And that travel is unlimited. you will be gaining every second of your life if you try to imitate me. Behave as I want you to behave. Be my slave in both senses. Listen to my dictates, and because I am knowledgeable and I know what is better for you, if you follow me in the sense that you obey my orders, even then you will improve. And if you follow me in the sense that you try to imitate my attributes, try to be Rahman, try to be Rabb, try to be Malik Yawmiddin, and so on and so forth, then you will improve again. So you will not stay at one single moment, you won't have a stale moment in your life. So that is the meaning of ibadah. And now once you understand that meaning, immediately the whole prayer is understood by you. Because everything you say or do in the prayer is an exercise in the direction of Allah. And it's so full of meaning and philosophy once you understand the meaning of prayer. So ibadat is this ibadat which is mentioned by Allah. And as far as that objection is concerned, that Allah has done it for His own sake, for His selfish end, this has been totally denied by Allah in another place. It says that if you, all of you, pay no respect to me whatsoever, are completely broken away from me, have no contact, not a semblance of a contact, what will happen? You will begin to decay, but nothing will happen to me. It doesn't serve me anything if you pray to me or pay homage to me. If you don't, then you will be destroyed because you will have severed the lifeline between me and you. So that is the meaning of Ma khalaqtul jinna wal insa illa liya'budun. Now why it is said jinna and insa? Why didn't it say alone ins? Because ins means the common man and jinn means the great man. And the Holy Quran tells us that however great you be, you are always in need of being my abd. Because nothing can be greater than myself. So no pride should hinder you from being my abd. And may you not be conceited about it, that because we are big men of the world, we are the greatest politicians or presidents of such and such country, so we are free from homage to Allah.